Everyone, and welcome to Domain 4, Module 19.3. We're going to talk about conformity and obedience today. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. Pause where you need. So let's first talk about conformity. So this is when we adjust our behavior or a thought process to coincide with a group's ideas or standards. And in social psych, we study when conformity is more likely. And the most famous social psych experiment on conformity was conducted by Solomon Asch. In 1955, he conducted an experiment where he selected college-age students, and they believed that they were signing up for a visual perception test. They were given a series of lines, and they had to match the line, which is this one here, to one here in terms of length. So clearly the answer is 3. Now, they were put in a room with 7 other people. They thought, here's a picture of this, they thought that all of these people were also taking the visual perception test. However, all of these people were actually Confederates. There was only one participant in this line of college students, and that was the student who sat 6th out of 7. And the idea was that at first they would give the correct answer, these Confederates. So they were told, give the right answer the first 2 times. So in this case, the answer would be 3. And it was meant to be a very easy perception test because we weren't testing visual perception, we're trying to test conformity. So each of these Confederates were told to give the correct answer the first 2 times. So answer is 3, 3, 3, 3. They get to him. Okay, this is easy. Answer is 3. Again, they do this. The third time, the Confederates give a clearly wrong answer. So in this case, for example, they might say 2. All of these people say 2, and then they get to the participant, and Asch and his researchers were studying what would this person do? Would they conform, or would they give the correct answer? So if no one else was in the room, they chose the wrong line 1% of the time. However, if those 5 people ahead of them gave the wrong answer before it was their turn to speak, the participant ended up giving the wrong answer 33% of the time, even though it was clearly incorrect. So there have been many other conformity studies since Solomon Asch's study in 1955. One study showed participants a lineup of individuals, and they believed that they were studying something for police investigations and looking at the effectiveness of lineups. One group was given the slide with the faces for 0.5 seconds, and the other group was given the slide for 3 seconds, a much better time slot to get a visual idea of what the person looks like. Some were told that their answers were unimportant, not going to matter, not a big part of this. Others were told they were very important. Some were told that the most accurate identifiers would receive $20, so giving them a motive. So the results found that when the judgments were easy, so given the 3 seconds, and when they were deemed unimportant, fewer than 20% conformed. They were motivated and it was easy. They didn't want to conform. They wanted to give the right answer. However, more than 50% conformed to the opinion of the others in the group when the task was deemed important and difficult. So the 0.5 second group. They also found that if being correct they were told that was an important factor, they were more likely to conform. So they felt less sure of their answer if everyone else was giving a different answer. So like I said, there have been many more studies, and what they have found is this. If you feel incompetent or insecure, if you are in a group of 3 or more who are conforming, if the rest of the group is unanimous, if you are in some way impressed with the people in the group, Think about like going into a really hard class and like just like all those students are really amazing students, you're more likely to conform. If you are being observed by others, you might conform versus when you're maybe kind of on your own, can do your own thing. And culture plays a factor here. In some cultures, it is encouraged to conform, and in others, it is not. So our social influence is also also affected by our beliefs. So if we agree with the belief or the value that is being supported by the behavior, we tend to conform to that behavior. If the social influence supports an ideal that we oppose, we are actually more inclined to view that behavior as being like a sheep. You're weak-minded, you're just following along, you can't think for yourselves. However, we do the same thing if it falls in line with our belief. So let's move on to obedience. So obedience and conformity are different. Obedience is the tendency to comply with orders, implied or real, coming from someone who is perceived as an authority figure. Stanley Milgram conducted the most famous experiment on this, and he devised an experiment where participants believed they were shocking someone. So again, they used Confederates. So remember, Confederates are people that are in on the experiment and are used in a particular way to see how the participant reacts to their behavior. And so the participant was to press a button, and you can see this machine over here. They were to press a button that would deliver higher and higher voltages. So the first time they would press the lowest button, the next time this button, and they were trying to see, so these buttons would shock, or they thought would shock the Confederate. Really, the Confederate was in on the experiment. They were not being shocked. They were playing along. But the participant thought they were shocking this person. And so each time they were told to push the button. And they wanted to see how far would this participant go in obeying orders. Would they go up to 450 volts, which is the max voltage? And each of these were labeled from slightly light shock, moderate shock, severe, extremely severe, XXX being the top one. So these were all men who were in the original experiment, and this is what it would look like. So here is our Confederate, and they're going to sit there and pretend that they are being shocked. And the participant is in here, and they would read some pairing words, okay? Because they think it's a learning experiment. So they're going to give these word pairs, and the Confederate has to give the right answer. If they give the wrong answer, the participant must push a button, and they believe incorrectly, that it's going to deliver that shock. And over here is the experimenter. He's wearing a white lab coat, he has a clipboard, and anytime the participant might say, hey, maybe we should stop, the person in the white lab coat says, we must continue. It is essential you continue this experiment. You have no other choice. You must go on. And they wanted, again, to see how long they would listen to that authority figure and push these buttons, even though they know they can hear this person saying things, expressing pain. And eventually the person actually goes silent. So are they unconscious? Are they not breathing? The participant is left to not know. And this guy is still sitting here saying we must continue the experiment. So the results of this found that up to 65% of the teachers obeyed all the way up to that last switch. When he did the experiment again and added the participant having a slight heart condition, So he would say at some point, like, I have a heart condition. The results did not change. People still complied. In 10 later studies, they conducted this experiment on women, and they found similar obedience rates to men. Some people question, since this was done a while ago, that people are less likely to conform. It's a different time period, different generations. However, when they conducted this experiment in more recent times, for example, in 2009, they found similar results, only a slight reduction in conformity. So here we have really a self-serving bias. We think, oh, the people back then would have conformed, or we think other people might conform, but I don't conform. And that's a very normal feeling, and it's very hard to separate this. So we have to look at data and not our common sense. Our brains would tell us one thing, but science and research tells us another thing. Ethics in Milgram. So this experiment obviously has a bunch of ethical issues. For example, these people in this room, here's one of the participants, believed that he had shocked another man until he was non-responsive. The person was saying they had a heart condition, and still he was told to push this button. So during the time of the experiment, the person was very distraught and uncomfortable, and there's a lot of emotional distress there. After the experiment, the participant was told, hey, this was just an experiment to actually see if you would obey an authority figure. We weren't really testing learning here. The person really wasn't shocked. They're perfectly okay. Here they are. Here's Bill. However, that participant has to walk out of that experiment knowing full well that they were voluntarily willing to push a button that delivered a shock with 450 volts that possibly could have killed a man. So there was a lot of backlash to this experiment. The APA's ethical guidelines had not come out yet at the time of this experiment. So this kind of brought to attention issues like that the APA needed to address. The message that Milgram wanted people to get, and remember, he did this after the Holocaust, and a lot of people, and still today, questioned how could so many people be involved in such a horrible act of killing a massive amount of people, an attempted genocide. And so Milgram's message was that good, ordinary people can be corrupted by an evil situation, that obedience to authority can lead people to do things that they would otherwise not do, and even that they feel great distress about doing. So our takeaways: people are more likely to conform if they feel incompetent, if they're part of a larger group, 3 or more, if the group is all unanimous on something, if it is something deemed important, or their college encourages it. We can look at Ash's line study and see that 33% of people conformed. And we can look at Milgram's obedience study for obedience and see that over 60% of people obeyed all the way through that final switch. Milgram's study received negative feedback about its unethical process. And remember that key message, that ordinary people are capable of being part of a terrible, destructive process. And that wraps up Mod 19.3, and I will see you in class.